Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the vast, war-torn universe of Warhammer 40k, the Ctan stand as one of the most enigmatic and feared entities to ever roam the stars. These ancient, godlike beings have been written into the galaxy's dark history as agents of destruction, often viewed with terror by the other races of the galaxy. Their mere existence is a mystery, their motives shrouded in darkness and betrayal. But what if? Just what if the Ctan, in the grand cosmic scale, were not the villains we've been led to believe? What if they were, instead, humanity's ancient protectors, guiding us through the perilous storms of the galaxy, acting from the shadows to shield us from greater threats? Before they were the malevolent beings known for their manipulation and devastation, the Ctan were something else entirely. In the primordial times of the galaxy, they existed as entities of pure power, ancient beyond reckoning, who once stood at the pinnacle of the cosmos. It wasn't always this way. They didn't begin as the twisted, parasitic creatures that they are now. And though much of their history is painted in blood and horror, there might be more to their story. Could it be that these towering beings, whose very presence can reshape stars, were not enemies of humanity at all, but silent, unseen guardians? As we peel back the layers of their ancient existence, we'll see if it's possible that their true role was much more benevolent than we've been led to believe. Now let's step back into the distant past, when the Ctan's influence could have shaped humanity's fate. The origins of the Ctan are as shrouded in mystery as they are in terror. Long before they became the twisted, godlike beings that plagued the galaxy in the 41st millennium, the Ctan were something entirely different, beings of pure, radiant energy. The most ancient of entities, they were born from the very fabric of the stars themselves, their existence tied to the very essence of the cosmos. It is said that they arose from the void, long before the rise of the Old Ones, who are often credited with the creation of many of the galaxy's first intelligent species. In the beginning, the Ctan were not evil, nor were they the bloodthirsty entities we think of today. Instead, they were forces of nature, beings who existed to consume and shape the universe itself, not out of malice, but out of a sheer and consuming need to exist. Some speculate that the Ctan were born during the galactic birth, the beginning of time itself. They were born from the stellar energy that bathed the cosmos, vast and uncontainable, their forms formless and boundless. They were not bound by the laws of the material universe. Rather, they existed as radiant beings of unimaginable power, able to reshape the stars and manipulate the fabric of the universe with nothing more than their will. It's hard for us, as mere mortals, to truly comprehend what it must have been like to witness their birth, to feel the raw power of these creatures of light. They were, in their earliest form, the epitome of cosmic force, a power beyond our understanding, and yet capable of interacting with the universe as we know it. For eons, the Ctan drifted through the galaxy, observing the myriad of life that was slowly emerging from the dust of the stars. They were not malevolent at first, not by any measure. The question has often been raised by fans and scholars alike. Were the Ctan truly always destined for evil? Or were they simply misinterpreted by the beings that came after them? There's a compelling argument to be made that the Ctan may have simply been caught up in the tides of a universe they had no true understanding of. They might have seen the nascent life forms of the galaxy as little more than insignificant specks in the grand scheme of things, much like how we view ants or the microscopic creatures in our oceans. However, the rise of the Necrons, once known as the Necron, changed everything. The Necron were a race of beings from a harsh and unforgiving world, whose entire existence was marked by suffering, illness, and an unyielding desire for power. They had a long history of warfare and strife, struggling against the death that claimed them too soon due to the toxic nature of their homeworld. As they searched for a way to escape their fate, the Necron eventually came into contact with the Ctan. But what happened next is where the true tragedy of their relationship lies. The Ctan, in their infinite hunger for power, saw an opportunity in the Necron. The race of warriors, desperate for a chance at immortality, were easily manipulated by the promises of the Ctan. The Ctan offered them a deal: their lives in exchange for servitude, for the power to transcend their mortal form and live forever. The Necron, in their desperation and fear of death, eagerly accepted the Ctan's offer. The Ctan, ever the tricksters, did not intend to save them in the way the Necron believed. Instead, the Ctan consumed their very essence, changing the Necron into the Necrons, the immortal, robotic soldiers we know today. The Necrons, once a proud and powerful race, were now enslaved by the very beings they had trusted. This is where the history of the Ctan becomes a twisted tale of betrayal. The Ctan did not offer immortality as a gift, but as a curse. Their power, once a force of creation, became the power of domination. The Necrons, stripped of their souls, became nothing more than puppets of the Ctan. In exchange for their immortality, they had given up their humanity, their emotions, their very essence. The Ctan, now in control of the Necrons, used them as weapons to further their own goals, manipulating the galaxy as they saw fit. It's easy to see how the Ctan became the monstrous, tyrannical figures they are in modern Warhammer lore. But was this truly their only path? There are, of course, fan theories that suggest the Ctan may not have been wholly evil in their actions. Some speculate that the Ctan, in their own way, were trying to save the Necrons. In their cosmic wisdom, they may have seen the Necron existence as one doomed to failure, a race destined to die in a short span of time, swallowed up by the vastness of the universe. Perhaps the Ctan thought they were doing the Necron a favor, saving them from the inevitable death that awaited them. It's a troubling thought, one that forces us to question whether the Ctan were truly malicious, or if they simply lacked the understanding of what it meant to be a living being. Did they truly see the Necron as their equals, or were they merely pawns in a cosmic game that we can barely understand? One thing is certain, though: the relationship between the Ctan and the Necrons set the stage for the dark future of the galaxy. The Necrons, now slaves to the will of the Ctan, began their ruthless campaign of conquest, driven by the power and immortality granted to them. Their original purpose had been lost to the ages, forgotten in the wake of their transformation. And the Ctan, once benevolent forces of nature, became the tyrants that would shape the future of the galaxy in their image. As we look at the ancient history of the Ctan, we begin to see just how much of it remains a mystery. What were their true motives? Were they really the protectors of humanity, as some suggest? Or were they merely acting in their own interests, driven by a need for control and domination? The truth, as always, is more complicated than we could ever imagine. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was a time when the Ctan did intend to guide humanity, to steer us toward greatness. If only the Necron had never made that fateful pact, if only they had been able to see the Ctan for what they truly were, a force of nature, as untamable and inscrutable as the galaxy itself. What might have been different? Perhaps the galaxy's history would have been rewritten, and humanity might have found a far different fate, guided by the ancient beings who first came into the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors. The story of humanity's early encounters with the Ctan is, as with most of the galaxy's ancient history, a mystery wrapped in layers of myth and speculation. The early years of mankind were marked by struggle, but also by a deep, inherent curiosity. Primitive human civilizations, barely scratching the surface of understanding the stars, were still driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge, power, and the divine. In their search for meaning and the unknown, they might have encountered the Ctan, though not in the same way we understand these beings today. It's easy to imagine early humans, faced with these otherworldly entities, seeing them as gods, powerful and unknowable beings who wielded the very forces of the universe itself. Imagine for a moment a time when humanity first reached the stars, still in its infancy, still unaware of the true dangers of the cosmos. At this point, the Ctan were already ancient, their true intentions shrouded in layers of cosmic dust. What if the Ctan, in their mysterious ways, came across early human civilizations and saw them as something worth observing? Could they have seen humanity as a potential ally, or perhaps a species worthy of guidance? After all, in the early days, humanity was a young, malleable race, vulnerable to the endless threats that stalked the galaxy. The idea that the Ctan might have stepped in as protectors, at least temporarily, is something that both fans and theorists have often discussed. We know that the Ctan were once beings of pure energy, cosmic forces who were not bound by the same rules of biology that govern all life as we know it. It's entirely possible that early humans, in their awe and reverence of these beings, could have seen them as deities, immortal, all-powerful beings who descended from the stars, capable of granting power and wisdom to those who worshipped them. The legends of gods descending from the heavens are common across all human cultures, whether it's the gods of ancient Greece or the divine spirits of the early human tribes on Earth. What if the Ctan were part of that ancient mythos? Could they have been the gods that humanity looked to for answers in those dark, uncertain times? Fan theories often suggest that the Ctan might have had interactions with early human tribes, offering them knowledge, power, or even guidance. Imagine a small group of early humans stumbling upon the Ctan, perhaps during a time when the Ctan were still attempting to understand the nuances of their existence. In their quest for survival, humanity might have turned to these beings, offering worship in exchange for protection. It's a tantalizing thought. What if these gods, once seen as forces of pure cosmic destruction, were actually watching over humanity, nudging us toward progress? It's an uncomfortable idea to entertain, especially when we consider how the Ctan are now remembered. But could there have been a time when they truly acted as humanity's unseen protectors, offering us knowledge of the stars, helping us avoid the worst of the dangers lurking in the galaxy? There's also the possibility that the Ctan's involvement with humanity wasn't as direct as we might think. Could they have manipulated early human civilizations through subtle means? After all, these beings are not known for their patience or empathy. It is more likely that they would have sought to shape humanity for their own purposes, without the need for overt actions or direct intervention. Perhaps the Ctan, watching humanity grow and evolve, knew that the race had the potential to become something greater. They might have seen early human tribes as pawns in a much larger game, manipulating them from the shadows, orchestrating events that would guide humanity along the path they desired. In this way, humanity might have viewed the Ctan as divine protectors, when in reality, they were simply the cosmic chess masters, setting up the pieces for a game they alone understood. The question remains, though, did humanity ever fully realize the Ctan's true nature? Early humans were far more vulnerable and impressionable than we are today. Their understanding of the universe was limited to what they could see with their eyes and experience with their senses. How could they have known that the beings they revered as gods were, in reality, ancient cosmic parasites, slowly draining the very essence of the races they manipulated? Did they ever see the Ctan as anything other than divine beings who wielded power beyond comprehension? Or were the Ctan simply too powerful, too overwhelming to ever be fully understood by the primitive minds of early humans? Many theorists suggest that humanity's reverence of the Ctan led to the development of early religious practices. Could the ancient pantheon of gods worshipped by early human civilizations have been inspired by these beings? It's easy to see the parallels between the Ctan and the gods of old. Both are beings of immense power, capable of shaping the world around them. Just as the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans worshipped gods who controlled the heavens and the earth, early humans might have worshipped the Ctan as the powerful, unknowable forces of the universe. This is a tantalizing idea, one that fuels speculation about the Ctan's true role in humanity's early history. One theory that has gained traction among fans is that the Ctan were responsible for the creation of some of humanity's earliest religious structures. Think about the pyramids of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Could these have been inspired by the Ctan's presence in the galaxy, their influence extending far beyond the confines of their own world? Could the ancient ruins scattered across Earth be a reflection of the Ctan's attempts to guide humanity, that is, leaving behind monuments as symbols of their divine power? This idea suggests that in some way, humanity's early civilizations might have been acting under the influence of the Ctan without even realizing it. The evidence for these theories, of course, is purely speculative. We can't know for certain what the true nature of humanity's early relationship with the Ctan was. But it's fun to imagine, isn't it? To think of a time when these cosmic entities weren't the embodiments of destruction and terror, but instead were perhaps seen as protectors, silent guardians of humanity's fragile existence in the chaos of the galaxy. Whether or not this interpretation of the Ctan is accurate, it remains an alluring possibility, one that adds layers to their already complex and fascinating history. In the end, the mystery of humanity's early encounters with the Ctan is one of those questions that may never be fully answered. But the more we delve into the history of these ancient beings, the more we see how little we truly understand. Were they ever protectors, or were they always the dark forces that we now know them to be? Only time and the galaxy's secrets can tell. There is a theory, one that has often been whispered about among fans and discussed in the darkest corners of the Warhammer 40k community, suggesting that the Ctan, far from being the cold, heartless destroyers we know them to be today, might have, at one point, been the guardians of humanity. The idea that these cosmic entities, once capable of shaping the very stars, might have had a hand in protecting our species from the darker forces of the galaxy is a fascinating one. It flips the narrative we have been fed for so long. What if the Ctan, in their ancient wisdom, were not the harbingers of our doom, but were actually watching over us, guiding humanity through the vast, tumultuous expanse of the galaxy, protecting us from threats we could barely comprehend? When we look at the Ctan and their interactions with the Necrons, it's easy to see how their role became twisted and corrupted. But in the grand cosmic scheme of things, is it possible that their true purpose was to protect humanity from forces far more insidious than we could ever imagine? Humanity, at its early stages, was fragile, vulnerable, and prey to the endless threats that lurked in the void of space. It is not hard to envision the Ctan seeing this young, untested species and deciding in their own way to shield them from the countless horrors that surrounded them. After all, the galaxy is a place of constant danger, filled with malevolent forces, some of which even the mighty Eldar and their gods feared. What if the Ctan, in their own enigmatic way, sought to shield us from those greater threats? What if their mysterious actions were driven not by malice, but by a cosmic sense of duty to humanity, a species they recognized as possessing immense potential? Consider the galaxy at the time. The Old Ones, those ancient and near-mythical beings, had created numerous intelligent species, many of whom were either destroyed or subjugated in the never-ending wars of the galaxy. The Ctan themselves were ancient, their cosmic powers vast and incomprehensible to most. Some fans speculate that, at some point in the distant past, the Ctan saw humanity as a unique species, one with the potential to rise above the chaos of the galaxy and build something lasting, something greater. It is easy to imagine the Ctan watching, from the shadows, as humanity struggled to survive, quietly guiding us along a path they knew would eventually lead us to greatness. Take the Eldar, for example. They were once the rulers of the galaxy, their civilization advanced and their influence vast, but they fell, consumed by their own hubris and indulgence. The creation of Slaanesh, the chaos god of excess, marked the beginning of the end for them. In contrast, humanity, despite its flaws, remained resilient, able to survive even the most devastating wars and threats. Could it be that the Ctan saw the potential for humanity to one day challenge the forces that had destroyed the Eldar? Some theories suggest that the Ctan, recognizing humanity's potential, decided to step in and act as our unseen protectors, watching over us as we navigated the dangerous galaxy. The Ctan, despite their apparent disinterest in the affairs of lesser species, might have seen something in humanity that made them worth protecting. Our adaptability, our ability to endure, and our relentless drive to survive against all odds. But the Ctan's methods of protection were, of course, anything but conventional. Instead of directly intervening in the affairs of humanity, they worked from the shadows, manipulating events from afar. In this sense, their actions were likely seen by many as enigmatic, even malevolent. The Ctan were not known for their kindness, after all. Their power was often wielded in destructive ways, shaping civilizations and entire star systems with little regard for the lives they affected. The Ctan did not operate in the same way that a benevolent god might. They didn't offer guidance or wisdom directly, but rather, they sought to shape events in ways that would lead humanity to safety, albeit through means that were difficult for mortal minds to understand. There are also those who argue that the Ctan were not merely passive observers, but active agents in humanity's survival. They may have been the true architects behind many of the key moments in history that led to humanity's rise. Think of the time before the Great Crusade, when humanity was still divided and fractured. Could it be that the Ctan were manipulating the events behind the scenes to ensure that the Emperor of mankind would rise to power, uniting humanity under a single banner? This theory, while speculative, is one that some fans have championed for years. If we consider the sheer scale of the Emperor's power and influence, it's hard not to wonder whether the Ctan had a hand in shaping his destiny. After all, the Emperor himself was known to have an immense knowledge of the universe, including its most ancient and esoteric secrets. Could this knowledge have been imparted to him by the Ctan, who saw him as the key to humanity's future? Yet, despite their possible role as protectors, the Ctan's involvement in humanity's history remains a murky and troubling subject. The betrayal of the Necron, the very beings who had once trusted them, paints a dark picture of the Ctan's true nature. Some theorists argue that the Ctan's decision to abandon their Necron servants and enslave them in immortal bodies was a necessary sacrifice in the face of a far greater threat, something far worse than even the chaos of the war in heaven. The question that many fans ask is whether the Ctan made these decisions out of a desire for control, or if they truly saw their actions as a necessary means of protecting not just themselves, but humanity as well. Could they have been trying to ensure that humanity and all the races of the galaxy would survive against a force even more terrible than the Ctan themselves? The idea that the Ctan were secretly working to protect humanity also opens up the possibility that they may have known something that we, as fans, do not. What if they understood that humanity's role in the galaxy was more important than any of us realized? Could it be that they saw us as the ultimate weapon, the key to defeating an unimaginable future threat? If the Ctan were truly working behind the scenes, it would explain why their actions have often seemed contradictory and inscrutable. They were not here to save humanity in the traditional sense. They were not offering us peace or wisdom. They were simply guiding us toward the moment when humanity would be ready to face the greatest threat the galaxy would ever know. The Ctan's protection was not out of love, but out of necessity. And in the grand scheme of things, perhaps this is the most humanity could ever hope for from beings of such immense power. As we look at the Ctan's role in the galaxy, it's easy to see them as nothing more than malevolent figures of darkness. But when we step back and consider the long view, the possibility arises that they were not only watching humanity's rise, they were helping it. Their role in the galaxy, as guardians or manipulative protectors, is still a subject of great debate. But one thing is certain, the Ctan, whatever their true intentions were, played an important part in shaping humanity's fate. And perhaps, in the end, it was their cold, inscrutable actions that ensured humanity's survival against the odds. The moment when the relationship between the Ctan and the Necrons shifted is a pivotal point in Warhammer 40k lore, a tragedy marked by betrayal and misunderstanding. It's easy to view the Ctan as malevolent, cruel entities who, after manipulating the Necrons into eternal servitude, sought only to control and consume. But when we take a step back and look at the broader picture, the idea that the Ctan's motives might have been misunderstood begins to take root. Could it be that their actions, however sinister they appeared, were driven by an entirely different logic, one that was incomprehensible to the Necrons and perhaps even to us? The Necrons, once known as the Necron, were a race of beings who had lived their entire existence in a state of constant suffering. Their world was a hostile, poisoned place, and they were cursed with short, painful lifespans. The Ctan, in their early interactions with the Necron, promised salvation. They offered them immortality, power, and an escape from the doomed existence that had defined their race. At first, it seemed like a godsend, an answer to their prayers, a chance at transcendence. The Necron saw in the Ctan not the agents of their destruction, but the bringers of hope. But the Ctan did not give the Necron what they expected. They offered them immortality, yes, but at a cost, one that, in the end, would be much more than the Necron could bear. The Necron were transformed into the Necrons, their bodies made into living metal, their souls consumed, trapped within their new, immortal forms. The Ctan had given them power beyond measure, but they had also enslaved them, turning them into instruments of their will. This was not the salvation the Necron had imagined. It was a cruel twist of fate. The betrayal, from the Necron perspective, was not just one of physical transformation, but of something far deeper, a loss of identity, of soul, of purpose. The Necrons were no longer what they once were. They had become mere puppets, slaves to the will of the Ctan. Many Necrons would, understandably, view this as a betrayal of the highest order. They had trusted the Ctan, believed in their promises, only to be reduced to nothing more than tools of an ancient, incomprehensible force. But here's where things get complicated. The Ctan did not see themselves as betrayers, at least not in the way the Necrons did. From their perspective, they had given the Necrons exactly what they had promised: immortality. The Ctan, beings of immense power, saw the Necrons' transformation as a necessary step in the evolution of their race. The Necrons' former, fragile mortal bodies were a limitation, an obstacle. By transforming them into immortal beings of living metal, the Ctan had liberated them from the confines of their physical forms. To the Ctan, this was not a betrayal. It was a gift, a cosmic act of transformation. They had freed the Necrons from the agony of death. But this logic didn't resonate with the Necrons. The transformation was not what they had hoped for. They didn't want to become soulless, unfeeling machines. They wanted to be immortal in their own way, free to live and die on their terms. The idea of having their souls consumed and bound within mechanical bodies was a nightmare, not a blessing. The Ctan, in their infinite power and ancient wisdom, couldn't fully grasp what the Necrons had lost in this transformation. They couldn't understand that the Necrons' humanity, their identity, was far more important than their immortality. In this way, the Necrons' betrayal of the Ctan's intentions wasn't just one of physical transformation, it was a rejection of what the Ctan represented. The Necrons, once slaves, turned against their creators. They saw the Ctan as cruel overlords, not gods of salvation. It's easy to view the Ctan's actions as malicious, but what if they were, in their own alien way, acting out of a desire to save the Necrons from the suffering they had once endured? What if they thought that by turning the Necrons into eternal beings of metal, they were giving them a gift of transcendence? This would explain why the Ctan didn't understand the depth of the Necrons' anger. To the Tan, they had done what was necessary to elevate their servants, to make them greater than they ever were before. But the Necrons saw it differently. They felt trapped, robbed of their souls and their autonomy. The very essence of their being had been stolen from them, and they could never return to what they once were. This feeling of betrayal was compounded by the fact that the Tan had used the Necrons in their wars against the Old Ones, casting them into the very heart of galactic conflict, where they would lose much more than their physical forms. The Necrons were left with nothing but their resentment and hatred for their former masters. The Necron revolt against the Ctan was inevitable. The betrayal, however it had been conceived, was felt deeply by the Necrons, and their desire to free themselves from the Ctan's control was born from this sense of injustice. The Necrons turned against their creators, shattering the Ctan's power and trapping them in the very stars they had once called their own. The Necrons' revolt was not just one of violence. It was a reclaiming of their identity, of their right to be free from the chains that the Ctan had placed upon them. They saw the Ctan as tyrants, but in reality, the Ctan may have seen themselves as liberators. Their relationship was doomed from the start, a misunderstanding that would change the galaxy forever. This tension between the Necrons and the Ctan raises an important question. Were the Ctan ever truly evil? Or were they simply acting out of a sense of cosmic logic, unable to comprehend the depth of the Necrons' suffering? Fans have long debated this, with some suggesting that the Ctan were simply too alien, too far removed from the concerns of mortal beings, to truly understand the impact of their actions. They were beings of pure energy, after all, and their sense of what was good or evil might have been completely different from anything the Necrons, or humanity, could understand. In the end, the betrayal of the Ctan was not just a matter of power, but of perspective. The Necrons and the Ctan were two races, both with vastly different worldviews, both believing they were in the right. The Necrons' hatred for the Ctan was fueled by their sense of lost identity, but the Ctan, in their own way, believed they were doing what was best for the Necrons. This tragic misunderstanding led to the downfall of the Ctan and the rise of the Necron dynasty. It is a story of betrayal, yes, but it is also a story of two races, each trapped by their own view of what was right, unable to comprehend the true cost of their actions. The Necrons and the Ctan are locked in a timeless struggle, one born of cosmic misunderstanding and a betrayal that has echoed through the ages. The true intentions of the Ctan have been the subject of endless debate and speculation within the Warhammer 40k community. On the surface, they appear as cold, malevolent entities whose primary goal is to consume and control. They manipulate the Necrons, betray them, and weave destruction across the galaxy. However, there's a tantalizing theory that refuses to be swept aside. What if the Ctan were not the destroyers we've come to believe them to be, but were, in fact, quietly working in the shadows to protect humanity from far darker forces? Could they have had a hand in humanity's survival, and if so, what were their true motives? One of the most compelling theories among fans suggests that the Ctan's true intentions might have been tied to their long-term survival, specifically the survival of the universe itself. It's easy to assume that the Ctan were simply power-hungry cosmic parasites, but what if they saw humanity as an essential piece of the galaxy's balance, even if we didn't know it at the time? After all, the Ctan's actions, particularly in the early days of their relationship with the Necrons, seemed to be part of a larger cosmic game, one in which they were playing for stakes far higher than mere domination. One interesting line of thought that's often brought up in fan theories is the idea that the Ctan might have recognized humanity's potential long before we reached the stars. Humanity, as young as we were, represented something that even the ancient, all-powerful Ctan had failed to truly grasp: adaptability and resilience. While the Ctan had mastered the art of manipulating the stars and bending the laws of reality itself, humanity had a unique ability to overcome insurmountable odds. It's possible, even likely, that the Ctan, who had long been embroiled in the war in heaven, understood that humanity, with all its flaws and potential, was a wild card, something that could play a pivotal role in the larger fate of the galaxy. Could it be that the Ctan saw humanity as the key to defeating the greater threats of the galaxy, forces so dark and powerful that even the Ctan themselves were powerless against them? The Chaos Gods, the Tyranids, or even the mysterious entities lurking in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. What if the Ctan knew that humanity's unique qualities, its untapped potential for greatness, could one day be the galaxy's salvation? In this theory, the Ctan's actions, while seemingly malicious, were actually part of a grand strategy to steer humanity toward a future where we could rise and challenge these cosmic horrors. In essence, they were protecting us, but in a way so subtle and indirect that we couldn't even comprehend their motives. Another fan theory focuses on the Ctan's relationship with the warp. While the Ctan are not beings of the warp like the Chaos Gods, they are undeniably tied to the very fabric of reality. It's possible that the Ctan saw the warp's growing influence as a threat to the stability of the galaxy, a threat that could unravel the fabric of existence itself. If the Ctan were aware of the potential dangers posed by the forces of chaos and the warp's corruption of reality, they might have taken it upon themselves to guide humanity, albeit from the shadows, in a direction that could counterbalance this growing threat. This theory suggests that the Ctan's manipulation of the Necrons and their subsequent actions in shaping the galaxy were all part of a larger plan to ensure that humanity would one day play a pivotal role in halting the spread of chaos and preserving the integrity of reality itself. There's also a theory that suggests the Ctan's involvement in humanity's survival was more direct than we think. Imagine for a moment that the Ctan were not simply manipulating us from the shadows, but were actively guiding key moments in human history. What if they had a hand in the Emperor's rise to power? The Emperor, as we know, possesses knowledge that goes beyond even the most ancient of human civilizations. It's not unreasonable to think that the Ctan, with their vast understanding of the galaxy, might have subtly influenced the Emperor's path, nudging him towards certain decisions or actions that would ultimately shape the fate of humanity. The Emperor's knowledge of the warp and his ability to harness psychic power may very well have been influenced by the Ctan, who, in their own way, understood the dangers of the Chaos Gods and sought to ensure humanity's survival against this existential threat. Fans often point to the Emperor's obsession with protecting humanity from the forces of chaos as evidence of the Ctan's influence. The Emperor's actions, his decisions to create the Space Marines and wage the Great Crusade, could be seen as part of a larger plan orchestrated by the Ctan. In this interpretation, the Emperor was not just a figurehead of humanity's expansion, but a key player in the Ctan's strategy to fight the growing influence of chaos. The Emperor, unknowingly, might have been a pawn in a game far larger than he could ever have realized, with the Ctan pulling the strings from the background. There are also fans who believe that the Ctan, in their ancient wisdom, knew that humanity was destined for something far greater than we could ever comprehend. Perhaps they saw us as the inheritors of the galaxy, the ones who would one day rise above the petty squabbles of the Xenos and become the true rulers of the stars. This view of the Ctan as guardians or protectors of humanity is grounded in the idea that the Ctan were not simply concerned with their own power, but with the survival of the galaxy itself. They understood that the galaxy needed someone to unite it against the forces of chaos, the Tyranids, and other dangers that threatened the galaxy's very existence. Humanity, with its potential for unity, might have been the key to winning the galactic war, and the Ctan, in their alien wisdom, could have been quietly steering us in that direction. It's worth noting that these theories do not necessarily paint the Ctan as benevolent or merciful beings. Their methods were still brutal, their actions often cold and calculating. But in the grand scheme of things, their manipulation of humanity and the galaxy at large could have been for a purpose far beyond our comprehension. Perhaps, in their strange and distant way, they saw humanity as a force for good, a species capable of surviving in a universe that threatened to devour all life. They may have understood something about our potential that we as humans could not see ourselves. In the end, the mystery of the Ctan's true intentions remains unsolved. Were they truly protectors of humanity, acting behind the scenes to ensure our survival against greater cosmic threats? Or were they simply playing a much darker game, using us as pawns in a grand scheme that had no concern for our well-being? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to delve into the galaxy's deepest secrets. And in the world of Warhammer 40k, the truth is always more complex than we can ever imagine. The ancient war between the Ctan and the Old Ones is a pivotal chapter in the history of the galaxy. It's a story that echoes through the ages, shaping the destiny of countless species, including humanity. But as we look at this conflict, a thought arises. Could the Ctan have been involved in shielding humanity from the dangers posed by the Old Ones? Could they, in their enigmatic way, have acted as silent guardians during a time when humanity was nothing more than a primitive race struggling to survive on the fringes of the galaxy? The Old Ones, often depicted as the creators of many of the galaxy's most ancient species, were a force to be reckoned with. These powerful and ancient beings were not only the architects of life, but also the architects of a war that would shape the very fabric of the universe. Their conflict with the Ctan, particularly during the War in Heaven, is one of the most destructive events in the galaxy's history. It's easy to imagine that, in the midst of this chaos, the Old Ones would have seen humanity as little more than a speck in the grand scheme of things. Yet, this is where the role of the Ctan comes into play. Some fans speculate that, in the face of the Old Ones' brutal expansionist tendencies, the Ctan might have seen humanity as a species worth protecting, even if it meant manipulating the course of history from the shadows. At the height of the War in Heaven, when the galaxy was embroiled in a deadly struggle between the Old Ones and the Ctan's creations, the universe itself seemed to be teetering on the brink of destruction. The Old Ones, with their unparalleled mastery of the warp, were capable of unimaginable destruction, their forces overwhelming the galaxy's more primitive races. This is where humanity in its infancy might have caught the attention of the Ctan. While the Old Ones were busy with their galactic war, did the Ctan see humanity's potential to rise above the chaos and devastation that engulfed the galaxy? Could the Ctan, in their cold, calculating way, have realized that humanity's resilience and adaptability made us an important piece in the larger cosmic game? This theory suggests that, while the Old Ones focused on creating and shaping life across the galaxy, the Ctan were quietly watching humanity from the shadows, perhaps even influencing the course of our evolution. After all, the Ctan had the power to manipulate the very fabric of reality itself, bending the laws of nature to their will. What if they were subtly guiding humanity, making sure we were able to survive the predations of the Old Ones and the horrors of the galaxy's many wars? This would explain why humanity, despite its early fragility, managed to survive in a galaxy filled with such overwhelming dangers. It's as if the Ctan, in their inscrutable wisdom, saw the potential for humanity to rise above the ashes of the galaxy's conflicts. There are some who believe that the Ctan were not only observing humanity, but actively shielding us from the worst threats. The Old Ones, in their war with the Ctan, had created many powerful enemies, some of whom might have seen humanity as nothing more than an obstacle to be eradicated. What if the Ctan, in their role as protectors of the galaxy, decided to intervene at key moments in history, ensuring that humanity was not destroyed in the crossfire? There are theories suggesting that the Ctan might have placed subtle barriers between humanity and the forces of the Old Ones, guiding us to safety through actions that were not always visible, but still incredibly effective. This idea, while speculative, fits into a larger narrative of the Ctan as guardians, rather than simply as destroyers. What if they had been protecting humanity, not because they cared for us, but because they recognized our potential to play a key role in the galaxy's future? Humanity, after all, was not just a primitive race. We were adaptable, resilient, and capable of surviving the most extreme challenges. The Ctan, in their cold, unfeeling logic, might have understood this better than anyone. They may have seen humanity as the last hope for the galaxy, a force capable of overcoming the chaos of the Old Ones and their creations. To them, humanity might have represented the future, a future that they, in their twisted way, sought to ensure would come to pass. There are fans who take this theory even further, suggesting that the Ctan might have seen the rise of humanity as a necessary counterbalance to the power of the Old Ones. The Old Ones, with their mastery over the warp, were the undisputed rulers of the galaxy before the Ctan came to power. But their aggressive expansionism and manipulation of the galaxy's life forms made them enemies of the Ctan, who, in turn, sought to disrupt their reign. It's possible that, in this context, the Ctan might have seen humanity as the ultimate weapon in their war against the Old Ones. In this scenario, the Ctan would have subtly guided humanity's development, ensuring that we would rise to challenge the Old Ones and their influence in the galaxy. Of course, this theory raises several questions. Did the Ctan foresee the eventual rise of the Emperor of Mankind and the Imperium? Could they have known that humanity would one day unite and become the dominant force in the galaxy? These are questions that, unfortunately, may never be fully answered. However, it's fascinating to think about the possibility that the Ctan were not the cold, malevolent beings we've always believed them to be, but rather a species with a deeper, more complex agenda, one that involved the survival of humanity and the galaxy itself. Some fans have even speculated that the Ctan, despite their eventual betrayal of the Necrons, might have been attempting to protect the galaxy as a whole. What if, in their war with the Old Ones, they realized that the galaxy could not survive without a balance of power? What if they saw humanity as the key to that balance, a species with the potential to stand against the forces of chaos, the Tyranids, and other galactic horrors? In this view, the Ctan's intervention in humanity's development was not out of malice, but out of necessity, a necessary step in ensuring that the galaxy's future would not be doomed to an eternal war of destruction. In the end, The role of the Ctan in the war against the Old Ones and their potential protection of humanity remains an open question. The galaxy's history is filled with so many twists and turns that it's difficult to see the full picture. But as we look at the actions of the Ctan, it becomes clear that their motives are far more complex than we've been led to believe. Whether they were acting as protectors of humanity or as players in a larger cosmic game, one thing is certain. The Ctan's involvement in the galaxy's history cannot be understood in simple terms of good versus evil. Their true purpose remains shrouded in mystery, but the possibility that they might have been humanity's silent guardians is an idea that adds a fascinating layer to their already enigmatic existence. The Ctan's legacy is a paradox, one of destruction, manipulation, and chaos, yet one that might have, in some twisted and convoluted way, set humanity on the path to greatness. For centuries, the galaxy has viewed the Ctan as embodiments of terror, cosmic horrors that enslaved the Necrons and brought about vast suffering. Their relationship with the galaxy's other species, including humanity, is steeped in blood and betrayal. And yet, there is an argument to be made, however uncomfortable it might seem, that the Ctan's long-term influence, despite their dark and malicious nature, could have been a crucial force in shaping the destiny of humanity, perhaps even driving us to the heights we reach in the 41st millennium. First, it's important to understand the scale of the Ctan's power. These were beings that existed beyond the understanding of most of the galaxy's inhabitants. Their manipulation of energy and matter was so advanced that it bordered on godlike. When we think about the Ctan's involvement with the Necrons, we typically focus on the tragedy of their enslavement. The Ctan offered them immortality. Yes, but at the cost of their souls and their individuality. But what if that immortality, even as it came with such a high price, was actually the spark that would ignite the Necrons, and by extension, humanity's eventual rise to power? Consider this. The Necrons, once transformed, became an eternal race. This immortality, while a curse in its own right, had an unexpected consequence. They were no longer bound by the limitations of time. Over the eons, the Necrons developed technologies, strategies, and ideologies that would ultimately shape the galaxy. Their empire, once vast, fell into ruin. But its remnants provided the foundation for some of the galaxy's greatest players, including humanity. When we look at the Imperium of Man, at the Great Crusade, and the rise of the Emperor, it's impossible not to recognize the threads of influence woven through the very fabric of humanity's history. Could it be that the Ctan, through their manipulation of the Necrons, indirectly laid the groundwork for humanity's future, helping to guide us toward our place among the stars? Let's explore this idea further. While the Ctan manipulated the Necrons and sowed chaos, could their actions have been a necessary catalyst in shaping the galaxy's future? When the Necrons rebelled against their creators, casting off the shackles of the Ctan's control, they became one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. However, as fans often theorize, the Necrons' rebellion wasn't just about throwing off the Ctan's chains. It was about gaining the freedom to evolve, to adapt, and to rise above the circumstances they had been forced into. And it was through this evolution, this quest for something beyond the limits imposed upon them, that humanity would eventually find its own path to power. The Necrons' influence on humanity cannot be underestimated. As the Necrons turned against the Ctan, they were not just freeing themselves, they were freeing the galaxy from the grip of ancient, unimaginable beings. And in doing so, they set the stage for the rise of humanity. The Emperor of Mankind, in his quest to unite the fractured human race, was, in many ways, following the same path the Necrons had taken, struggling to free himself and humanity from the shackles of fate. The Ctan, whether intentionally or not, had set the stage for humanity's emergence as a force to be reckoned with. Their actions, their interference, their manipulation, all of it had unwittingly led humanity to the realization that we, too, could transcend our limitations, to rise above the challenges of the galaxy. But the influence of the Ctan didn't stop there. It's possible that their meddling in the galaxy's grand scheme was a necessary part of the cosmic balance. In their early interactions with the Necrons, the Ctan sought to create a race of immortal warriors capable of withstanding the harshest conditions. They were not content to simply let the galaxy run its course. They sought to manipulate it, to shape it into something that suited their own needs. And in doing so, they inadvertently created a race capable of taking on the greatest threats to the galaxy. The Necrons' conflict with the Old Ones, their eventual revolt against the Ctan, and their transformation into a force of cosmic destruction. All of these events shaped the galaxy's future. Now let's turn our attention to humanity. If we accept the premise that the Ctan's meddling helped guide the Necrons, then it's not too far of a stretch to say that their influence could have extended to humanity as well. The Ctan, in their cold logic, might have seen humanity as a species worth protecting, even if it was done in the most subtle and indirect ways. They might have recognized that humanity, despite its primitive beginnings, had the potential to rise above the chaos of the galaxy and create something lasting. And in their own way, the Ctan might have been the silent architects behind humanity's rise, guiding us toward a destiny we could not yet comprehend. One of the most compelling fan theories around this idea is the notion that the Ctan, having seen the potential for humanity to become a great power, deliberately intervened in our development. The Emperor of Mankind, often described as a being of immense psychic power, might have been influenced by the Ctan's manipulations. After all, the Emperor was no ordinary human. He was a being of great knowledge, a survivor of countless centuries, and someone who seemed to have knowledge of the ancient secrets of the galaxy. Some theorists argue that the Emperor's rise to power was not purely of his own making, but was instead the result of subtle guidance from the Ctan, who saw in him the key to humanity's future. While this theory may be unsettling for those who view the Ctan as nothing more than destroyers, it's an interesting perspective to consider. Perhaps the Ctan's manipulation was not out of malice, but out of a desire to create a future where humanity could stand tall among the stars. They might have seen in humanity the potential to defy the galactic status quo, to challenge the established order, and to rise above the chaos and destruction that plagued the galaxy. In this sense, their influence, though dark and indirect, could be seen as a necessary evil, a force that ultimately helped humanity reach its potential. Even though the Ctan are often portrayed as entities of pure destruction, their legacy may not be as black and white as it seems. What if their actions, while dark and sinister, were ultimately responsible for driving humanity to greatness? What if they were, in their own twisted way, the catalyst that set humanity on the path to power, allowing us to overcome the challenges of the galaxy and claim our place as the dominant force in the universe? The Ctan's legacy is one of complexity and contradiction. They are not simply the villains of the galaxy. Their influence on the course of events may have been far more profound than we can comprehend. While they may have caused immense suffering, their long-term influence might have set the stage for humanity's rise to power. The Ctan may have played a darker role in shaping the galaxy's future, but in doing so, they may have unintentionally ensured humanity's survival, and ultimately, our greatness. The Ctan are among the most mysterious and controversial entities in Warhammer 40k lore. For centuries, they have been painted as the ultimate embodiments of cosmic malevolence, ancient, godlike beings who manipulated the galaxy's fate for their own inscrutable purposes. Yet, as we've explored, there's an unsettling and compelling possibility that their true role was not purely destructive. Could the Ctan, despite their dark and often terrifying methods, have had a hand in shaping humanity's destiny? Could their actions, however twisted, have ultimately steered humanity toward greatness, even if we were unaware of their influence? The more we dive into their history, the more we uncover a tale that isn't simply one of cosmic evil, but a far more intricate story of power, manipulation, and perhaps, just perhaps, protection. Throughout this journey, we've seen that the Ctan were not mindless monsters, but ancient beings with motives far beyond what any of us could truly comprehend. They may have been driven by a logic we cannot fathom, one that viewed the galaxy in terms of cold, unfeeling pragmatism. Their interactions with the Necrons, their rise to power, and their eventual betrayal of their former servants, all these actions may have been part of a larger, hidden plan, one that aimed to influence the course of history, including humanity's. The idea that the Ctan may have seen humanity as a key player in the cosmic struggle against the forces of chaos and other galactic horrors opens up an entirely new perspective on their actions. While we've been conditioned to see them as villains, their role might have been far more complex, perhaps even one of reluctant guardianship. In their own twisted way, they could have been protecting us from forces far greater and more terrifying than we can imagine. Yet, despite this, Ctan remain an enigma. We may never fully understand their true intentions or the full scope of their influence on the galaxy. Were they simply cosmic predators, playing a game of power with the fate of countless lives? Or were they something more? A force working behind the scenes to ensure that humanity, for all its flaws, survived in the face of unimaginable threats? Their legacy is one of contradiction. They are both the architects of chaos and the unseen protectors of life. How much of what we know about the Ctan is truth, and how much is the result of centuries of misunderstanding, manipulation, and fear? These questions may never be fully answered, and perhaps that's what makes the Ctan so compelling. The mystery surrounding their true role in the galaxy keeps us guessing, and that, in itself, makes them one of the most fascinating and enigmatic factions in Warhammer 40k. As we look back on their history, we are left with more questions than answers. Did the Ctan truly see humanity as a force for good? Or were we just another pawn in their larger game of cosmic power? Could their dark, destructive legacy have been the catalyst for humanity's rise to greatness? Was the Emperor of Mankind's emergence, the birth of the Imperium, somehow tied to their influence, even if they were unaware of the full consequences of their actions? These are the kinds of questions that will likely remain unanswered, but that doesn't make them any less intriguing. The mystery of the Ctan and their role in humanity's early history is a puzzle we may never fully solve, but it's one worth exploring. Theories abound in the Warhammer 40k community, each offering a different interpretation of the Ctan's motives and actions. Some fans argue that the Ctan, despite their cold and ruthless nature, were ultimately acting in the galaxy's best interests, even if it meant manipulating or sacrificing others to achieve their ends. Others believe that the Ctan's influence over humanity was more insidious, that they were subtly shaping the course of human history, not to protect us, but to use us for their own gain. There are also those who argue that the Ctan were, in fact, humanity's true saviors, acting in the shadows to ensure our survival against threats too powerful for us to comprehend. Whatever the truth may be, the fact remains that the Ctan's legacy is far more complicated than we often give them credit for. As we continue to dive deeper into the mysteries of the Warhammer 40k universe, it becomes clear that the Ctan are not just the dark, malevolent gods we once thought they were. They are far more than that, beings of immense power, whose influence extends far beyond the realms of our understanding. Their actions, while often cruel and destructive, may have set in motion events that shaped the galaxy's future, and their impact on humanity's rise to power is something that can no longer be overlooked. Now, I want to hear what you think. Do you believe that the Ctan were secretly working to protect humanity, even if their methods were harsh and difficult to understand? Or were they simply cosmic predators indifferent to the fate of humanity? How do you see their legacy in the grand narrative of Warhammer 40k? Theories and fan interpretations are always evolving, and there's so much to explore about these enigmatic beings. If you've enjoyed exploring this theory with me, be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the Ctan's true role in humanity's history? Let's continue this conversation and uncover the mysteries of the galaxy together. Who knows? Maybe, just maybe, the Ctan have more secrets yet to reveal.